She won most talkative in high school, and she has been running her mouth ever since. Welcome to the Lisa Fisher Said podcast with your host, Lisa Fisher.
Okay, we're going to blow your mind with a few things with my guest today. I follow her social media. It's great. We'll put the links in the show notes. But Shana, you have the letters RD at the end of your name. And a lot of times people with my crazy philosophies don't agree with the austere Western medicine bought and paid for by big pharma philosophies of a registered dietitian. How do you get the two to meld together so you don't blow your brains out?
Right. So I've been in the conventional system. Well, I shouldn't say I was trained by the conventional system over 20 years ago. So it was a lot of indoctrination that I was fighting against. And it took me a long time to come to terms that whatever I was teaching from the conventional system was not working for my patients and students. So unfortunately, it took me too long to understand that. But yeah, sometimes the acronym after my name, RD, you can also say RDN, which just confuses people even more because it's either registered dietitian or registered dietitian nutritionist, and you can just pick which one you want to put behind your name as an RD. But sometimes I almost feel like I want to just drop that acronym and not even use it because a lot of how we're trained as a registered dietitian, like you said, the curriculum is mostly handed down by Big Food and it's funded by Big Food. And a lot of I just get a couple of emails a week from the Academy of Nutrition and Dietetics just to see what they're putting out there. Sometimes it's good information. I'm not here to bash that industry, but in a lot of them, I'm like, and this is what people, we're looked at, registered dietitians are looked at as the top nutritional professionals. And, don't argue with anything that a dietitian says. And, it's like holier than thou nutrition. And I had to take myself out of that. Several years ago, just because I didn't agree with what was being asked of us to teach recommendations. And not only that, but if I stayed in the conventional system, I had to teach those guidelines, and I couldn't
forget it. Yeah, that's the conflict. That's it's funny. Yesterday, I interviewed a gal who has had success with intermittent fasting, as I'm an intermittent fasting health coach, and she's leaving the restaurant industry for the absolute reason that she cannot use seed oils. She does not feel authentic cooking foods in seed oils and serving them to her guests. That's really where rubber's meeting the road right now with people with our point of view. And if this is your first time to my podcast, I think Shana and I are on the same page with the point of view is that fasting is everything. I mean, fasting cures a list this long. I can't even fit in my screen of the things that intermittent fasting has done and changed my life. But fasting does not hold that place as a registered dietitian. Several years ago, so I started fasting in 2017, and in 2018, I hosted a podcast for it's a private hospital here in Arkansas Heart Hospital. Like, I have mad respect for it, but they knew that I was kind of the mouth of the South with fasting. So as a former broadcaster, I was still on the radio then. As the host, they said, well, Lisa, why don't you do one segment? Even though we talked to cardiologists and all the things about how to prevent heart disease, they said, why don't we have one of our RDs come on and kind of do a point counterpoint? And Shana, this was 2018. They were coming to me saying, nope, we still tell people to eat 5 small meals a day. And that was in 2018. This is 2023 now. Are they still saying that?
For the most part, I would say yes, not all. There are some, I get several dietitians contacting me through Instagram mainly, or sending me emails saying, I really want to get out of this space. I respect what you're teaching. I want to teach what you teach. But they need the job. They need the insurance. They need to stay where they're at. Right. So they just keep teaching this nonsense. But honestly, when I did work in the conventional system, and it's been a long time, And somebody would come into our nutrition clinic for whatever disease state, you were labeled with a disease state.
Right.
And then you take your little folder of handouts out for that disease state and you just kind of check your boxes. And I think there's been some headway made in the diabetes area because the newer, I think it's the president of the American Diabetes Association has type 2 diabetes. And so they
Oh,
recognize that low carb is a very exceptional therapy for type 2 diabetes. So we're making some headway there. And there are more and more dietitians recognizing that eating all the time and, dosing for carbohydrates eaten is not the way to go for diabetes.
well, they
So
want to manage it because they need to make
exactly.
money.
That's what everything is. It's just a diagnose and manage, diagnose,
Yes.
treat with pharmaceuticals. And it's hard as a dietitian because you truly want to help people get better with nutrition therapy. It's just the tools and the strategies that you're taught are completely not helpful for most people. And when we look at 92% of
I
Americans
know.
having some sort of metabolic disease, it's like these guidelines of eating 5 times a day and eating all these grains and eating all this, even if they're whole grains,
Whatever.
it's just
Whatever. Yeah.
not working. And I wish we could just take a step back as an industry, not even just the dietetics industry, but so many industries, and say, hey, why is 90% of us, why are we sick? Like even 100 years ago, this problem did not was not apparent. So it's super frustrating. And I do think more and more health professionals in general, not even just dietitians, are leaving the space. But it's hard because then you have to, do your own startup and try to make your own way. And as a dietitian, I was not taught how to be a business owner and how to do all that.
Right.
So I had to learn that all on my own. It's like I'm a clinician and a teacher. I'm not a marketing and
Right.
even my podcast, I had to learn, you just have to learn it all
Yeah.
while still teaching and putting content out there.
Well, I thank you. I thank you.
Oh,
Let's do a quick rundown, only because Maria Menounos, I think it's how you pronounce that name. She's been on all the channels, all the things. Just this week, she had a benign brain tumor years ago, so she gained some notoriety with that. Then she was infertile, gained some notoriety with that. And then this week, she's revealed that she had stage 2 pancreatic cancer, which we never hear it diagnosed at stage 2. By the time you hear about it, it's metastasized. But the other thing she said in an interview on the Today Show was she was just diagnosed. She's got to be 40 with type 1 diabetes. Is that the 1.5 or the 1.5 or whatever when somebody's that age? Because that's not traditional juvenile diabetes, right?
Type 1 can occur at any age. Typically, it's when you're younger because it's
Oh,
just a faulty pancreas of some sort. It's not known. It's thought to be even an autoimmune illness.
right, right,
It can be caused by a virus, bacteria. It's not
right.
known, but it can occur at any age. But it's typically more in childhood. And it's what's really fascinating, and not in a good way, is that children and even babies are being born so insulin resistant that they're now type 2 diabetes. So we can't
That's
even call that
that's
adult
insane.
onset diabetes anymore. It's just
No,
type 2 diabetes because young children and even babies are showing up with these high blood sugars because they're basically born insulin resistant, and they're given their lifestyle, they don't have much of a chance to be metabolically healthy.
then I just had a client because now my big thing is I tell everybody have your fasting insulin tested, especially if they're saying I can't lose weight. I, no one ever, but we all know that no one ever looks at it until because you have to ask your provider and they go, you don't want that number. And my clients have to say, well, yeah, I kind of do. So, sure enough, one of them who was having some other issues, she looked a little PCOS too. It just had a baby. I can't remember now, but the mother called me and said, "Thank you for having us do it." She was diagnosed with the late onset, the LAD. Is that what they call that? It's 1.5. It's the one they're calling 1.5. So are their pancreases working or no? So type 1's your pancreas, your beta cells are not working.
Pretty much. I mean, there's different stages of it there.
Okay.
And so sometimes the pancreas might be working at a lower function and it's putting out some insulin, but not enough to keep things regulated. So there's different stages. Typically in type 1, the islet cells, which are in the pancreas, are completely destroyed. But with type 2, and the 1.5, I'm not sure exactly what the pancreatic function would be. The type 2, a lot of times the pancreas is functioning.
It's
just
totally functioning.
There's so much
It's drunk.
insulin.
I mean, it is drunk with insulin.
Good way to put it.
Yeah.
A good way to put it. And it drives me insane when conventional doctors or providers will not order that fasting insulin test.
Why won't they? It's a $5 test. I don't
I
get
know,
it.
if that. Yeah. Well, I was going to say it's like $30 is usually the most you'll pay for fasting insulin. So what I've gathered is that they don't know how to interpret the results and how to treat the elevated fasting insulin. And they're on the hook for that if it comes back abnormal.
I see.
And they don't know what to do about it. And the other problem is a lot of the guides or what do you want to say? Where the numbers should be when you're
reference
getting
range.
Reference range. The reference ranges will be so different than what is actually healthy because the reference ranges are usually for fasting insulin for inpatients, which are very different than outpatients. So when you're inpatient, your insulin is usually pretty high because you're putting out a lot of stress hormones. You're putting out, a lot of cortisol and glucose.
I see that.
It's completely different. So, you might get a fasting insulin back at 15 or 20, which is very elevated and in the
extremely high
severe range. And your doctor will say, oh, that's normal because the reference ranges are not accurate. So there's just a lot of issues. And I can't tell you how many people contact me and say, my provider won't do fasting insulin. What should I do? And there are home kits available that I recommend. But
there are? Okay, because I get that pushback. They'll say they'll run, because I always say get high sensitivity C-reactive protein, get a complete thyroid panel, which I have, they'll say, oh, they did. It was a TSH. That's not complete. So it makes me nutty. Yeah, as a thyroid patient that I would have never been diagnosed if I didn't have somebody finally, after 4 years, look at my antibody profile and it was off the page. But the one that they come back with is he or she won't order the fasting insulin. So I was wondering if they can walk into any of these lab tests now, or if they could do it at home and send it out. So what do you recommend?
Yeah. So if your provider won't do it, always ask your provider. They may or may not. So what I recommend for insulin resistance are 3 tests. There's more that would give you a full picture, but fasting insulin, fasting glucose, and hemoglobin A1C will strongly give you an indication of where you're at for the severity of insulin resistance. And then, like you said, I like to look at that CRP. I like to look at a full lipid panel, especially the triglycerides, because that's tied into insulin resistance as well. But if your provider won't give you a fasting insulin test, I work with a lab provider called ZRT Laboratories. They're out of Portland, I believe. And they will send you just a fasting insulin kit, or they'll send you a complete metabolic kit. There's another one from So Well Health that I have linked on my Instagram page. They'll give you a full, they mail it right to your door. It's a finger prick. You send it back.
Awesome.
And, it's more expensive usually because it's not going to be covered by insurance. But, if your provider won't get you one, which is super irritating,
it's a huge picture. It's a huge look into your health.
Yeah.
It's for the person who says, I can't lose weight. My doctor says my A1C is fine at 5.6. I'm like, that's not fine. And my fasting glucose is fine at 105. I'm like, that's not fine. But once you explain, look at your fasting insulin, then to me, it's just a game changer.
And I can't tell you how many people contact me via whatever method they contact me and say, my provider told me I'm fine because my glucose is 95. or
Right.
my hemoglobin A1C
Right.
is normal. But then once I did the fasting insulin test that you recommended, it came back 33. And I'm like, well, there you
And
go.
that's, yeah.
There's your problem, because those blood sugars are not, it can be years to decades before those show up as elevated. So,
I,
yeah,
I've
it's
said
just so
before that
backwards.
insulin is the smoking gun of our health. It tells more, and Dr. Ben Bickman, of course, references that and why we get sick. He was the first to explain that I fully understood, because even though Dr. Fung talks about glucose and insulin, he never talked about any diagnostic tool, or that I remember, because
Yeah.
he's pretty sciencey. So part of
Yeah.
it I probably fast forwarded to the next chapter because I listen to his. I don't read his because it's so sciencey. But until Dr. Bickman explained it and why we get sick, then I could see the picture that it told a lot, and it's a great barometer of your health.
Yeah.
So,
He's one of my favorite scientists for sure.
oh, for sure, yeah, favorite scientist award. Okay, now let's talk about fasting. Tell me your journey and when you started, how you got involved, and what it did for your life.
I started right around the time that you did. It was like 2018 that I started to dabble in it. And again, being professionally and, conventionally trained
Oh,
dietitian, so my son got very ill in 2016, which is another whole story. But because of his illness, we were thrown in the conventional system, and they wanted to throw it was an autoimmune illness that they wanted to throw very heavy drugs at. And so
ugh.
I started to do all this research on how can I help him with the root cause, rather than just put them on, forever
Yeah.
immunosuppressants. So I went down every rabbit hole I could possibly look down, and intermittent fasting just kept coming up with all of these newer.
Oh, for his illness, you found it as a remedy or panacea.
I did not. He was only 11 years old at the time that he
Okay.
got
Okay,
very
got
ill,
it.
and his was ulcerative colitis, which is
Uh,
a inflammatory
yes. Oh,
bowel
I'm
disease. Terrible,
aware.
which
Yeah.
it can be very helpful for, but just
Not
given
at
his
that
age,
age.
yeah,
Yeah.
given his age, we didn't do fasting, but there are people who do, and
Yes.
completely turn their colitis and Crohn's around. But anyway, I was going down so many avenues, and listening to all of these newer integrative doctors, and they just kept talking about intermittent fasting, Dr. Mercola being one of them. And I was
Mhm.
like, I don't understand that. Like, why wouldn't you
I
eat it
know.
when you get up? Like, this makes no sense to me.
I
Like,
don't understand it. That's what I said at first. I went, "I don't understand it. I thought I had to eat 5 or 6 times a day."
yes. And I was an early morning exerciser. I was a
Me too.
runner. I was like, I have to have at least a
Me
string
too.
cheese and a banana before I go on my run. It's like,
Yes.
so I was eating from 5 a.m. until 9 p.m. It was good. It was healthy
Yes.
food, or at least
Yes.
so I thought,
Yes.
that I was just eating all day. And I never had a big weight problem, but I had terrible canker sores in my mouth from the time my third child was born. I had terrible bloating. I was bloated all the time. Um, Even though I wasn't overweight, I had to work my butt off to maintain my weight where it
Mhm.
was at. I mean, I was running all the time. I was weight training. I had 3 little kids, and I
Mhm.
just thought, why is this so hard? Why is this so dang hard to manage my weight? Following,
Mhm.
doing all the things that I thought
Mhm.
I should do as a nutrition professional. So I just started dabbling in intermittent fasting, and even just like, I remember the first day I went till noon without eating. I was like, oh my goodness, I can't believe I did that. It's
That's all.
noon.
I
It was
know. I
just so
felt like I
crazy.
needed a medal or a crown. Like,
Yes.
I was so impressed.
Yeah. And so I just started doing it. And then I just kind of, there were so many benefits for me. And it was kind of a fast forward thing where I was at that time working in a digestive health clinic, and I decided to just, do an experiment on like 20 people, and they all had just fascinating outcomes. We did it for
Wow.
12 weeks, just intermittent fasting and eating real food. I
Yes.
didn't even teach all the things that I know now. I mean, this
Right.
was just kind of a small piece of the puzzle, and it was astounding how much success they had. And so I went off on my own, and I was writing all these handouts for people, and I thought, I'm just going to make this into a book. And so I wrote a book and started to, promote things online and set up my own business. And now it's like, I cannot believe the outcomes people are having.
I know.
And so I mainly, weight loss is always a huge part of the puzzle for most people that I work with, but I really work on reversing insulin resistance and getting metabolically stable and working on blood sugar regulation. And then that weight will just regulate itself in time. So if you really just focus on the insulin part and the blood sugar regulation, it just all starts to come together. And it's for you and me, we had the light switch moment. Like, people just have the light switch moment and they're like, oh, thank you for teaching that.
Thank you.
This
Right.
is not hard. These are
No.
simple things. I get it. Like, I get why I got sick. I get what I have to do to stay unsick, because there's no reason for you to go back to being sick once you know these concepts. And it's so freeing for people. There's just so much hope and confidence with just implementing a few simple strategies, that it's not like, 20, 30 years ago where you're on a diet or off a diet, or
Right.
counting calories, you're lowering fat intake. It's not like that at all. And people get so excited about the sustainability of it.
Well, there's no math involved.
Right.
I mean, and there's nothing to think about. You're not hungry. You don't want to eat until it's time to eat, because you're not hungry until you're hungry. I mean, the other way, eating 5 times a day, I was hungry all day, because I
Right.
didn't realize they were telling us to put another log on the fire to fuel our metabolism, when in fact we now know it was releasing insulin, and that's a fat storing hormone. So all I did was I poked the bear all day with the fat storing hormone.
Oh, for
Said,
sure.
come on. Because I got up, I've been on the radio for 15, 20 years, getting up at 3:45, 4 a.m. So I had my righteous, high fat, low carb breakfast, but I sipped on that stevia, because I'm not a coffee drinker. I sipped on a stevia flavored cherry limeade water while I was on the radio every morning from 5:30 a.m. to 9 a.m. My insulin was up to here.
Okay.
So I would leave the radio station and I had to eat my handful of nuts, because that was my second meal. Because I was following, as a thyroid patient, you have to see, obviously, if you see an endocrinologist, don't recommend. But in the beginning, I did, because that's who finally gave me my diagnosis. And there's always a diabetic educator, but also with diet, they'll help, a dietitian. And then at noon, I got my meal in. And then at 3, I got my meal in. And then I ate at 6, and then I tried to be in bed by 7:45 to wake up at 3:45, So I'm saying I did what I was told, and I did cardio every day for an hour, and I continued to gain weight. And now I know it's cortisol,
Right.
but nobody told that to me. They just said to cut my calories. And I was so hungry, Shanna, after every meal, I wanted seconds. I never want seconds now. I barely finish, because I do eat a meat-based diet, which has such high satiety, but I never go back for seconds. I truly don't eat. I'll probably do hamburger patty and eggs when I open my window today. And I might do that, I might have bacon and butter at 5 o'clock. I mean, it sounds crazy. It's a man's dream. I am the perfect woman now to my husband, that we don't eat salads. But my point is the high satiety I get with what I eat, because I know you get this question all the time, and I don't know the answer. Lisa, how many calories do you eat? How many macros? How many fat grams? And I truly say, whatever this vessel needs to keep, just as your car, when it gets on eighth of a tank, the light goes off, or mine's a little yellow light in my car. Time to get gas. And he will even tell you, do you want to find a gas station? That's about what happens. My body I like eating like 1 to 6 or something, 1 to 5. At about 1 o'clock, it'll ding. But you know what? If I can't get to it, it's not an emergency.
Right.
My body will switch over and just burn some fat for fuel, because I clearly have enough. I'm in the West. Everybody, everybody in the West, truly, even third world countries, we're seeing obesity because of the high insulin rate. So I just kind of shake my head with all that. So you started then. Did you lose any weight since you didn't need to? You lost, I know, the control that macros and calories taught you as a dietitian, but did you lose any number on the scale?
I lost a couple of pounds. My body composition is, I'm 47 right now, and my body composition is the best it's ever been,
That's
probably.
awesome. That's when I wish I would have seen it, because that's when we're perimenopausal. We go through thyropause, meaning the thyroid and the HPA axis all kind of crash at the same time. And that's, you're at the age where I first looked down and went, I've gained 15 pounds and I didn't do anything. I didn't change anything and I gained 15 pounds. So you've really headed that off.
Yeah. So I think I was 43 or 44 when I
Yeah.
started intermittent fasting and really looking at my carbohydrate intake. And yeah, I mean, I eat 2 meals a day, and people say, oh, how do you only eat twice a day? It's like sometimes after, if I have a really filling, high protein first meal, I don't even think, like, I'm like, oh,
Right.
should I eat that second meal? Like, I'm nourished
Yeah.
and I don't need to eat anymore. So my body composition definitely improved. There was a couple of pounds that I lost, but it's just like not thinking about food is the best thing
Oh,
about this
so
lifestyle.
freeing. Yes.
And like you said, it's like, okay, I'm not going to eat when I normally eat, but I don't care. Like I could go days if I wanted to, as long as I'm hydrated and using
Right.
electrolytes. Like I can go days and I'm going to be just fine. So that was huge. My canker sores basically have went away. The only time I get them, I think I've linked them to like high insulin levels, blood sugar dysregulation, and then
Oh,
seed oils. I think because every once in a while I'll feel one coming on if I eat out and I don't go to a restaurant that doesn't use seed oils, which is around here. People
it's
have
ever.
no idea what seed oils
Yeah.
are.
Yeah.
So that was huge. But the other thing that's really interesting is my menstrual cycle is like the most,
Wow.
like it's just like it's so predictable right now, which is weird because I'm 47.
That's
And
awesome.
I never had like big issues with my menstrual cycle, but it was not as predictable as it is now. And other than I wear an Aura ring that shows me my
Yeah.
temperature and I kind of know like when it's going to be there and the tracking, like I barely know it's coming because I just don't have the symptoms of
Oh, you
cramping.
don't even have PMS?
No, I don't.
Wow.
And I didn't have big issues with that before, but I mean, I like I said, I know it's coming just because my temperature
Yep.
will drop when I'm about to get my period, but it's more regular now. And I don't know, I'll talk to you, if I talk to you a year from now, I might not be that. I
Right.
may not be in the same boat, but right now it's so predictable and so on. Like I'm just so in sync with my hormones compared to what I was in even my 20s and 30s.
That's insane. How old are your children now?
My kids are 19, 17, and 14. So I have three teenagers for a couple months yet.
I'm sorry. Yeah, it's hard.
Oh no, I love them. I
Oh,
love
you
the teenage
do? That's
years.
good.
Yes. Well, my oldest is in college, so I just have two boys here at home. But I honestly love the
You're
teenage years.
sweet.
Yeah.
Well, teenagers aren't as bad. It's when they go to college and they really think they know more than you, because they've been told by professors that they know more than you. And sometimes they do stupid things, but that's part of growing, because I
Yeah,
did
they
them
sure
too.
do.
And that's part of my life. So with the 14 and 17-year-old, because you don't want the 14-year-old even to consider intermittent fasting, do you have a breakfast still available for those boys and
They
for them,
they
or
eat if they want. If they're
good,
hungry in the morning, they'll eat. There's
good.
some mornings they do, they're off to school pretty early. In the summer, it's a little bit different. They're both very athletic, so they burn a lot of calories. So
Yeah,
I never
sure.
put any regulations on them, but we do focus on not snacking. Like
Good.
if you want a meal, you eat a meal, and I really focus on getting enough protein in their meals also, because my youngest would just sit down with a bag of nonsense food and eat the whole thing and not think
Sure.
about eating protein and fiber. So we do that. I'm not very rigid, but we do really work on just eating meals and not doing a lot of snacking. I mean, of course, if they're hungry, then they're going to eat, and then not a lot of eating at nighttime either. Like they know
Good.
that irritates me.
Yeah.
And that, if they have a late practice, that's one thing. They can come home and eat something, but this whole ice cream before bed every single night that a lot of kids do, or some, just snacking while they're playing video games or whatever, like we nip that in the bud at our house. And, some people might be listening to this and say, holy crap, like she's very rigid, but those are just things that I want them to understand before they leave my house. Because I
I
look at
think
my
it's
daughter,
great.
who's a sophomore in college. She's like, Mom, I eat healthier than 95%, probably more than
Right.
that, of kids at college, just because I know it makes me feel good. It's not like I feel bad about eating certain foods. It's just I know how I feel if I'm going to eat those foods. So that's my goal before, the boys leave.
Good.
My middle son will be leaving for college in the fall, but just so that they understand, if I eat this, I feel like this. If I eat this, I feel like this.
Yes. I
You know,
think once we take agency or ownership over our eating and understand that it's not out of a righteous thing or a diet thing. I have no diet culture in my brain. It's the
right,
fact that if I eat gluten, I, I'm going to toot for one thing. My stomach's going to hurt. Sorry. And
right.
it makes my autoimmune conditions worse. I'm trying to
Mhm.
reverse my vitiligo. So I'm having to pull back everything, dairy, everything right now. And I had some dairy last night because strawberry season in Arkansas is magical. And I whipped my own cream and put it on there. And later on, I regretted it. So, I have to remind myself, yes, that's there. And maybe a teaspoon of it would have been good. But I just was, after I made my delicious meal that I cooked, I had that. And it's just a self correcting error. And
Yeah,
that's what you want your kids to see. Yeah, if I eat that, it's also the decision they have to make with alcohol. If I drink that, I'm
Mhm.
really going to feel bad. And that's what I think. I don't know if fasting has done this to me, but at my age, I have lost all interest in alcohol. And I've heard Cynthia Thurlow say it too. It just interrupts my sleep, and my sleep is the most important thing, even more important than the nutrition is my sleep. So I've kind of given it. I mean, I'm pretty boring at parties. I'm club soda with salt on the rim and lime when I go to bars, and people think you're drinking tequila, which I don't care. But that way, the conversation doesn't come up because people then start getting real defensive, start telling you when they don't drink too much, and I don't care. I
Right.
don't care. I just know it's for me in my house. I can't
Mm.
handle it. But have you noticed that alcohol is so disruptive then to circadian rhythm, sleep, and your overall the way you feel?
For sure. My relationship with alcohol has changed a lot over the last 5 years or so. When I go out to eat, I get a seltzer water with a
Yeah,
lime and an orange. And yeah,
yeah, yeah,
like people don't.
for sure.
And again, like my husband doesn't care, my friends don't care,
Yeah,
but they
right.
just know it's not important to me. And like you said, my sleep is more important. I haven't been drunk, and I don't even. It's been years and years, but um, it just doesn't serve me in my body anymore. So for me to even, like, sometimes I'll bend and I'll like have a drink, and then I get
Yeah,
home like, what? Like, why?
I
What was
know.
the point of that?
I know.
If I'm ever at home, it's never like, it's just more of a social
Yes.
thing where you feel like, socially. And I live in
Every
Wisconsin, for
yeah,
goodness sake.
everybody
That's
has a
like
glass of wine or
130 degrees.
champagne and you're toasting and I take a sip and then I go, that wasn't even that good. I mean,
I know, and I just don't have the desire for it
oh yeah.
anymore, but for sure, if I even have, like, a couple of seltzers in the afternoon, it shows up on my Aura Ring that night as heart rate being elevated for much, much longer than when
Really?
yeah, it will elevate the heart rate earlier in the night. And then the thing with blood sugar with alcohol is a lot of times people will say, "Well, I see an actual dip in my blood sugar. It seems to be helping. Well, yeah, because your body has to stop processing all your macronutrients and deal with that alcohol. So you're going to see a
Because it
dip.
takes priority, right? Alcohol takes
Yes,
priority.
it's
Okay.
definitely if you want to turn off fat burning, drink alcohol because
Wow.
your body has to stop doing everything to go and deal with that poison. And so you'll see a dip in blood sugar initially, but then you'll see a rise because then your body goes back to having to deal with
Right.
all of that. And that rise in blood sugar, the inflammation that occurs it can be hours to days that you see an abnormally higher baseline blood sugar after drinking. So it's just not worth it to me. And I have, I just went to a Kentucky Derby party over the
Yeah.
weekend. I didn't
Yeah.
drink. I'm like, I don't care. I have
Yeah.
fun
I'm the same way.
socializing, and
Yeah.
I don't need to stay out till midnight anymore. I'm like 9 o'clock. Bye.
Oh, girl, you have no idea. I mean, it's
Well, you get up very, very early.
yeah,
But
right. So I have a client right now. Maybe you can help me. She's 60 years old, postmenopausal, gave up the hooch, gave up alcohol, started fasting with me, but is not seeing. She said, I thought if she was drinking a bottle of wine a night, like admit it, I'm drinking a
Mhm.
bottle of wine at night, thinking, because you get palpitations, or I did as when I was going through menopause. So I remember I did drink wine during those years as I was fasting. I thought it would help the palpitations. It does not. But she got into the habit, kind of 2020, etc. But she
Mhm.
said now she's been off alcohol. I think she's Catholic. So since Lent, that's February. This is May. She hasn't lost any weight. So what do you tell someone like that? What can she do to help tweak that?
Yeah, so I do provide personalized protocols for people where they fill out an intake form because I need to know like what their goals are, what their medical
Yeah.
history is.
Yeah.
And I get people asking me questions like this all the time, like
Hmm.
in my DMs. I'm like, I don't know anything about you. Like, I need
Yeah.
to know,
It's
like
very
I need to know your
individualized.
nutrition. I need to know your
Yeah.
exercise. I need to know your
Okay.
age. I need to know, and her other hormones might be wonked out too. She might
Yeah.
have real low progesterone or
Right,
testosterone and
and she's
prevention.
working on
Yeah,
bioidentical hormone
yeah.
replacement. So it's
So
I guess it's a cascade of hormones. It's
yeah,
everybody working
yeah.
together.
It's usually when it comes to weight management, it's not usually just one thing. But what I will say too is a lot of clients come to me, they're super frustrated. They've done intermittent fasting, like a
Yeah.
16-8 or an 18-6 protocol
Yeah.
forever, but they're not losing weight. It's like, well, that's a maintenance protocol for most
Right.
people
Right.
where you're going to hold your health where it is, but you're not going to see weight
Right.
loss. So you might just need to go, she might just need to go into the therapeutic zone if she had some pretty high
Yeah.
insulin levels to really bring that insulin level down enough where she's going to see some weight loss. And sometimes it's just doing like one therapeutic fast every couple of weeks, like, or a 24-hour fast once a week.
Yeah, those are really good. I've heard Jen Stevens say Jen has said there's a book called The 8 Hour Diet, which is a great thing to read, but it won't help you lose weight.
Yeah,
She says you can
yeah,
do an 8 hour diet, and it does mitigate probably insulin and some things with inflammation.
right,
But if you want to get serious, you really do have to rip the
right.
band-aid off and do, I mean, at least 20 and 4, 19
Yeah,
and
even a couple
5.
times a week because it's like hour 20 where that insulin
The
really.
magic, yeah.
And so if you're just doing 16 to 18 hours, yeah, you're holding your health and your weight where it should be. That's going to be a great maintenance protocol for
That's
you.
true.
But to flip it and to actually reverse the insulin resistance, if it's more severe, you're going to need a little bit of therapeutic fasting, most likely, and some carb restriction too.
Yeah. Okay. Well, let's talk about what everybody's talking about, and it's Ozempic. Let's talk about the GLP agonists that are there's Monjaro, Ozempic, Wegovy. They're different names for it, and they've been around. Ozempic's been around for years, but obviously we think the Kardashians started it. Everybody in Hollywood. Chelsea Handler even said her doctor just said, "I'm calling this in for you." Like you don't even have a choice, right? And Ozempic face is an issue. It has a black box warning for thyroid cancer. What are you telling people? Because you don't come from big pharma influenced anymore. You come from what's best for the body, what do you tell people?
Yeah. And where it got so popular is it went from being a type 2 diabetes medication only to now an
A diet.
indication. Yeah. If you have a
Diet.
BMI of over 27, now, now all of a sudden you
Yeah.
fit the bill. Although there's plenty of people who do not have a BMI of 27, just
Right.
taking this and,
Right.
taking it for 5 pounds of weight loss to go on spring break kind of thing, which
Right.
that's the part of it that gets me the worst. It's like there are type 2 diabetics who can benefit from this and,
Yeah.
get their disease process at least under control enough where you can start to implement some lifestyle changes. But, I'm always going to be impartial to lifestyle if you can see changes there. And the problem is people are put on Ozempic. They're not asked to change their lifestyle. They lose all this weight. And the most recent research study that I've seen with Ozempic, I think it was either 20 to 24 months after coming off of it, that they saw like 66% of their weight regain. And the other critical thing to think about with Ozempic, because I think there is a small population that can benefit from taking it,
Absolutely. Yeah, absolutely.
and when it's used as indicated. But one of my main fears with it is a lot of people are losing a lot of muscle mass with it.
Yeah.
And so you come off of it and you have lower muscle mass status than when you went on it. And now your metabolism's wrecked because you don't have that muscle mass and you haven't been taught proper lifestyle modifications. And it's like all the programs that I teach are doing what Ozempic does. It just takes a lot longer.
Yeah. And it's free. What we talk about is free.
Yes. It's just, and I get it. It's when people have been overweight and ill for decades and they just want to feel better. They
Right.
don't want to go through all of the lifestyle modifications and having to work at this for several months to maybe even some couple of years. But that's my fear, is just that it's used when it's not indicated to be used. You lose the muscle mass, and weight regain can be a big problem just because we haven't learned proper lifestyle modification.
Well, you mentioned protein, and I know a woman over 40 really needs, roughly they say 0.7 to 1 gram per pound of protein for ideal body weight. So let's say 140, you weigh 140, your goal's 140, you need like between 120 or 140. I can't do math, but you get the point. How I have someone right now who said she's dealing with someone who's 55 who is a vegan. How in the holy heck is that woman ever going to get the protein she needs by, licking soy, which is the last thing you need, or any other, vegetables all day?
I know we've been so lied to about
Oh,
macronutrients. It's criminal, but I usually give women a really easy target of 100 grams of protein or so to shoot. Put that as your target to start with, and it is. Women have a really hard time meeting 100
it's
grams.
hard. As
Yeah.
much as I eat, because I get full so easily, I get to maybe 90, 95. Sometimes I throw in a shake or some more eggs, but it's hard to, and I weigh 150
It
pounds.
is. It is. So most of my students are eating twice a day. So I'm saying, aim for 50 grams of protein each meal as your target. And I have them target that over anything else when they're first starting out. And I post like what I'm eating all the time on my Instagram page because people just they're like, how do I get 50 grams? And like you said, sometimes like a supplement or a shake,
Yeah.
it's just you find a good shake and that can be a good way to hit your target. But it's tough. And I people come to me a lot and say, I'm vegetarian, I'm vegan, and I still do your program. Like, you can do my program. It's gonna be a lot more difficult, especially if you're vegan. Cause I always say, like, will you at least eat eggs and dairy or fish? And that makes it a little bit easier. But I did do a podcast episode with an Indian. She was of Indian descent,
Yeah.
and
And
she's
they're
been vegetarian
South
her
Asian
whole life.
or vegetarians. Yeah.
Uh-huh. And she developed insulin resistance after
She did.
having her baby. And she was very educated, and she knew that it was due to too many carbohydrates. So she actually wrote a cookbook. I think it's called The Vegetarian Reset. And I had her on my podcast, and she was a wonderful guest. But she was able to reverse her insulin resistance only because she increased your protein enough and decreased your carbohydrate, which is tricky as a vegetarian. But she was still eating eggs and dairy, so that makes it a little more manageable. But yeah, it's so troubling because young girls just think vegetarian and veganism is the way to go. Like, if I just eat more carbs and I don't eat meat, and then it just setting you
awful.
up for hormonal issues and being, like you said, being hungry all the time and high
And,
insulin,
and
and it's just,
PCOS, right?
yeah, my daughter has PCOS, and it wasn't because, just
Yeah.
because of her carb, but oh my goodness, she's almost 20, and just to turn that ship around has been, and I'm an insulin resistance expert. So
Yeah.
it's hard once these girls get to the point of having hormonal issues and not getting their periods because they're not eating protein, they're not even eating fat, which are all the substrates for all your hormones and your sex hormones and your neurotransmitters. And they're just so deficient on these things. Their bodies just don't have the raw materials to make the hormones and for you to feel good, and so then you don't get your period. So it's really sad.
All right, let's talk about insulin resistance. It's an epidemic right now. And it must be processed food, seed oil. I mean, I'm just using deductive reasoning. High carbohydrate diet influenced by the Kardashians, who tell people to eat beyond beef. Please, people, don't you don't want to listen to my podcast if you eat like that, because I'm not here to shame anybody, but you'll think I'm nuts because I'm thinking about the next hamburger I'm going to have or steak. So what do you think is the impetus then behind this type of craziness that people want to eat fake meats and the convergence of insulin resistance?
Well, yeah, everything in our lifestyle is driving insulin resistance. All of, you go into the grocery store and 80% of the food system is fake food, high
Yes.
insulin, promoting food. And yeah, the fake meat industry just, ugh, it drives me wild. But I will say
Yeah.
around here, at least, like I used to go, like, even I would say last year, I'd go into Costco and it'd be like many sections of the freezer section were Beyond Meat and Beyond Meat
Ugh,
um, products, where now it's like it's diminishing more and more. And the sales of those products are just
good.
tanking,
Good.
which is great
Yeah.
because I just don't understand, like, how people can even think that something with 50 ingredients and a mile long ingredient list is going to be better than beef.
I,
But
I
it's just how
don't
we've been
understand.
conditioned. And I can't tell you how many people will comment on things on my Instagram posts like, well, I thought eggs and beef I have high cholesterol, so I can't eat those. Or it's just, we've been just it's so hard to turn the misconceptions of
Hmm.
nutrition. High saturated fat and cholesterol being one of them, high salt being, like
Hmm.
that is another issue. It's like all of these issues that we're telling people that fat and salt drive, it's all driven by sugar and processed food.
Absolutely. Who someone says, don't blame salt for what the sugar's done. Don't blame butter for what the sugar's done. Don't blame meat for what the sugar's done. It's all processed foods. And it's the processed salt that's in those packaged foods. If you get, this is why I tell my fasting clients all the time, because we do a 5-week meeting if we're doing it in a group. In the first week, I say, by the end of the 5th week, I'm going to save you so much money because number one, your eating volume decreases as an intermittent faster. Number two, they're going to start saying, I don't need processed foods. And that cuts it out. And then you don't need the $10 coffee from Starbucks because you're going to be drinking black coffee. So I'm going to make you rich. If you're in my fasting groups, and I say that way, it's an overstatement. I'm going to make you rich. But the point is, those processed foods, we need real salt. I wish I'm at my desk, but my Himalayan salt's great. My Celtic sea salt, that Morton salt, throw it out. The stuff that's in a package in a soup can, make your own soup. I mean, just make your own soup.
Yeah, there it's like I said, it's just so much indoctrination for the last 50 years, and people are just they want to feel well. They want to
They
follow the
do. They
guidelines.
do.
It's not like they're
They do.
non-compliant. They
That's right.
just don't understand. And big food, I mean, obviously doesn't want anybody fasting. I mean,
No.
they don't want people to know that sodium chloride made in a manufacturing plant is terrible for you and that you should have real salt.
Real salt.
They don't want you to know that there are 57 kinds of sugar that are in, so probably more than that, in just about every processed foods. They don't care. They don't care about your health. They don't care about the health of your kids. They just want to make money. And they'll slap anything on that. They'll put keto on it. They'll put low fat. They'll put low carb. They'll put all natural, anything on that label to get you to buy it. They don't care. So just eat real food that you know what the heck it is, and you'll be so much better off. And like you said, those foods, those real foods, are what tell your satiety centers, I'm full, I'm nourished. Like you can eat the junkiest food all day long and still just be hungry, hungry, hungry because it's not. And so going back to where you saw like in third world countries, we're seeing people obese. They're obese, but they're malnourished. It's like you can
Right.
have both at once, which
Isn't
is
that
really
crazy?
crazy. Yeah.
Yeah, that's crazy. Well, what's the one thing you want to leave us with? Like, what's the one thing that's really on your heart now in 2023 that people we've uncovered a lot of the myths, but what do you? I mean, what's our next thing that you think we're about to roll into that it's going to blow our mind? Seed oils blew my mind about a year and a half ago, so I've been, on the seed oil train since then. But what's new? Do you think on the landscape?
Yeah, seed oils still blow so many
Yeah,
minds. And even me as a dietitian, it's only been in probably the last 5 years that I was like, oh my gosh, I
yeah.
didn't know seed oils were so terrible. So we already talked about seed oils and alcohol. I don't know if this is like a fad, but I just think that, people are going to start to realize how simple it is to get healthy.
It is.
Honest to God, like
It's That's a good way to put it.
it's not hard. Like you just once you know and you can't unknow what is going on and you basically do the opposite of most of recommendations
Right.
out there.
For sure.
And one thing I will mention, this isn't even really nutritionally related, but I've gotten so much. Like I had a post or a reel on Instagram a couple of weeks ago that just went off because people saw it as so controversial. And I was listing like 12 things that I do that might surprise you. And I put avoid sunscreen.
No,
Holy mother, you would have
I,
thought I
no,
like
no, I commented on it, and I've
Oh,
gotten so many likes because I too have said avoid sunscreen, and I get the same pushback. And once
oh my God.
I want to challenge somebody to look at the sunscreen labels. They're carcinogenic, and that
Yes.
that
Go on your
fireball the
mainstream.
sky. Yes, and your blonde and blue eyed relatives 2 generations ago. Guess what? They didn't have skin cancer.
No. And the seed oil connection to burning and like that's fascinating to me. I haven't seen a ton of research, but I know more is being done. Like those who
Yes,
eat a lot of seed oils and processed foods tend to get burned more and
yes,
have more skin cancer. And so I just say to people like
yes.
cancer's multifactorial, no matter what cancer it is if it's on your skin, if it's in your liver, if it's in your colon, like not just one thing caused that. And yeah, so oh my gosh, I got hammered for that. Like, you don't wear sunscreen. I can't believe that. And you don't put it on your kids. I'm like, I never said I'd never wear sunscreen. I
Right,
said I avoid it.
and
And if
avoid
I
sunburn.
do, I don't put a crappy one on that
Right.
has
That's right.
30 carcinogens in it. I'd rather
Right.
get out the sun, put a shirt on, put a shade, get in the shade, or I do use a mineral based one if I absolutely have to, but it's not often because there are so many benefits from the sun. And
I love
how
it.
can the most natural thing in the world be so terrible for us? So I did think of that as I was going through that.
That's great. I love that. I saved it, in fact, on my phone because you had it on your screen. I thought it was so important. So I always say, if God made it, eat it or use it. And, the sun, sleep, that's what I'm saying. Everything I talk about is free or really affordable.
Right.
I don't want you to buy anything extra because I'm saying don't buy the sunscreen. I'm saying, now I do
Industries
have,
don't like us,
yeah,
Lisa. That's
no, I
for
know they
sure.
think, well, I'm not here to make $1 off anything. So
Right.
my future's not jeopardized because I'm not supporting a platform that I don't support. So it works out fine for me. Maybe this is why I didn't go to medical school. And that I'm not smart, but because I couldn't do it, it would drive me crazy. It would drive me crazy. Well, you're a great guest. Thank you so much. We'll send people to your social media, your Instagram, where you're stirring things up all the time, saying crazy things like don't wear sunscreen.
Right. And don't eat breakfast every day if you're not hungry.
Don't eat breakfast. I mean, the breakfast is the most important meal today. Mine will be at about 1:30 today.
Yep. And don't
That's
eat
when I'll-
breakfast. That's another thing that people get all up in arms about.
Yeah. Well, thank you so much. Good job today.
You're welcome. Thanks for having me.
Thanks for listening to the Lisa Fisher Said podcast. Be sure to hit subscribe and download all the episodes and leave a review, won't you? The Lisa Fisher Said podcast is produced by ClantonCreative.com.